The Margeteers, a video exclusive.
I have a totally different thought.
Okay.
Is how do you think the adoption of influencers has also changed in the last year? Do you think influencers are still as impactful? I mean, we're seeing a lot of, I follow people who don't know, like I follow a lot of women's sports and the rise and adoption and change of that. And there's been a great adoption of like Ilona Maher, obviously, is a really huge presence of what she's done for women's rugby, but women's body confidence and that sort of aspect. So you're seeing some of these, and what's interesting, like in the women's sport with influencers, is that because there's so little money in the game, a lot of them make as much or more in their, they like have to put the pressure on their social media to become these kind of influencer spots. But how do we feel like if you're going to a new client brief compared to 3 years ago, compared to 7 years ago? Are you recommending influencers and their go-to-market?
I think it depends on what segment that they're in, because one of the big trends I think is people are moving away from the traditional kind of influencer because they're turned off by the lack of authenticity. Like it felt like posing and it felt manufactured and inauthentic, right? So I think that there's a really big push away from health and beauty influencers in particular. The fact that you're bringing up Ilona, I think is a really good example. So she heralds from here in New England. And so I've been tracking her for quite some time before she really entered the national stage. And I think that kind of authenticity, where it's about making a change, it's about some sort of social impact on society, versus about what to buy next, the next lipstick, the next hairdo dad, the next piece of fashion. I think that people are becoming more discerning of who they follow and why they follow them, and to what impact they let those folks kind of come into their hearts and their heads and influence change. So I don't know. That's my personal feeling on it. I think people are looking for authenticity and social change in their influencers, and it's not so much anymore about what you buy next. Bethany Frankel. I love Bethany Frankel. I did a post on her because she did a post that had a camera in it that my team had designed. So that was kind of cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but one of the things that I love about her is she's doing this. She has this theme that she's been working on, which is de-influencing. You've heard that term recently, de-influencing. She was talking about how, you don't have to do the big, you don't have to do the Birkin bag. You can do the workin' bag. And I personally don't believe in stealing people's copyrighted designs. That's a whole nother story. But she's really trying to de-influence out of the really high-end consumerism strata. And she's saying there's really good products that you can get the lifestyle benefit from.
Totally.
And you can get them and spend $30 instead of $300, or $300 instead of $3,000, or $3,000 instead of $30,000. And yeah. I love that, because that, to me, she's fun, but she's also speaking to everyone. She's not being elitist. Even though she does elite things, she's leveled up. Her whole story is a level up story. She's started here and just her life just continues to go this way. So I think she's a really good example of someone who also reads the trends and figures out where to go. So I think your influencers have to be tied into what's happening culturally. And if they're not, it's going to miss the mark.
I think the thing about, like, I don't know. So they've come out with this rule in Australia where they're banning under 18s for creating social and this ability to be there. I read an article about this family that's moving from Australia to England. They're double passported, and because they make their whole living on YouTube, and they have a 15 and 18-year-old, so the 18-year-old is fine, but the 15-year-old makes content that they do, and they're like our livelihood. Now look, I think it's a singular problem. or this kind of creator space where like we're going to move countries because our livelihood is based on content creation is quite slim. But it's an interesting perspective because I mean, this is totally different, but it's just the responsibility, I guess, of what are we talking about from a consumerization marketing? Like, are you're talking about like the values and so forth. In the UK here, like Christmas time ads are really big. The first John Lewis ad has just come out. I'm going to put myself out there and say I don't think it's as emotional as everyone else thinks it is. There's a lot of nostalgia at the moment. I'm here for all of the 90s nostalgia. I am a kid from Seattle in the 90s. I know about heroin chic and grunge and the livelihood of that. Like the 90s were a dark time despite the rise of pop and everything, but all the kind of grittiness of it that now all of this grunge kids are now trying to protect the kids from any lived experience. Come at me for that. Yeah. But I don't know, I'm just starting to think of like the influencers and the idea of this notion of everyone's putting out a different story of than who they really are. You and I work in tech, so we know it's all fake. And so I'm always surprised by anyone who thinks anyone on a social media stage thinks that any of that is real. Like I'm shocked by it. And I go, but I don't understand why you think any of it's real. You're not putting out 100% of what's real in your life. Like, why do you think they are? So I think this, like the authenticity, I think is such a difficult conversation to have when we're going through influencers, when you're going through marketing launches. I tell my clients, like, I'm like, you can be vulnerable without giving up your privacy. And I think that's a difficult thing for people. Everyone's like, oh, it's so cringe. It's so difficult. And I go, you don't have to share that your marriage is broken down and the lessons that you learned from the second version of this marriage or whatever it is. Like that, I would argue that maybe that's not appropriate for LinkedIn or what some privacy is okay. But you can be vulnerable and say, like, I really paused in that meeting the other day because, it's taken a long time to when is it still appropriate to have a crucial conversation, which is what we call like the naughties, right? Like you need a crucial conversation or this like tough conversation. And I think it's difficult now to say when can you have, like, I would pause to say, is this an appropriate conversation to have?
Yeah.
Is it because it's tough? Is it step on toes? We live in a litigious, sensitive society. Like, and sometimes you say like, look, your work was crap. Like, you wouldn't say it like that. I wouldn't say it like that. Yeah. But that space of saying like, how do you have these productivity calls while still being sensitive? And sometimes I'm not in the workplace and in life. I am not responsible for the stories that people hold in their heads.
That's right.
Right. And so it's like, how do you go in and talk about those kind of tough conversations and saying like, sure, be mindful of somebody's bad day, but I also think you can come into a meeting and say, I'm having a bad day. So if I'm tough or whatever, apologies in advance, which you probably shouldn't apologize. It's very female to apologize in advance anyway, but just like, how can you let people know if things are, it's just communication in the end, isn't it?
Yeah. I have said something like
a little tangent. Sorry, Marg.
Yeah. I have said something like, I'm just off a really, rough call. And so if I'm on edge, I just wanted you to know why, but please ignore me.
Yeah, like the tone isn't meant for the people on this call. Do you think that vulnerability in the workplace is kind of reserved for hard times?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it has a lot to do with who you're working with. You have to read the room, I guess. It's like anything else. You have to read the room and know whether or not it's a safe place to be vulnerable. I don't think I've ever had this conversation with anybody. I'm thinking about it real time.
I think the thing about the vulnerability and the authenticity, I also think there's a little bit of like, do I need it depends like what kind of support you're needing, right? So if you're saying like, look, so for me, I'm like, this is the output or this is the goal. This is the thing we're trying to achieve. These are the blockers to get there. How can we overcome it? And sometimes I remember like early in my career, I wanted, I don't know, I wanted to post a schedule on some website, and the person who owned the website wouldn't let me do it. And I just had to like wait until somebody else was in charge of that website. Right. So like a year later, I was like, oh, she's left. There's somebody else. And so, there's that conversation of like, I failed to do that. Is that a failure? You know, I was like, literally, they're not going to let us do it. So we have to move on or find something else. And it was just an idea or something like that. But the whole aspect of saying, you know, we weren't able to achieve this because of those things, but equally, are you able to say like, I mean, this is so cringy in England to be like, we achieved something and we're really proud of ourselves. Like the whole proud moment, I think in this country would be a super vulnerable thing to discuss, to say, oh yeah, we're so proud of ourselves. We really did a great job. It is just the most un-British thing you can do.
Is
So
it?
I'm really like, guys, we need to celebrate. And it doesn't have anything to do with being American. It really has to do with this advice of another British entrepreneur is like, entrepreneurship's genuinely not worth it if you can't celebrate some of the micro victories you get, because it's such a hard
I
and
agree with that.
dumb slog. But
Yeah, I
so it's
agree.
that kind of thing of coming in, and I guess that's the only thing I can think of would be a positive vulnerability, but I think that's a cultural thing to overcome versus a personal thing to overcome.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
I don't
Cool.
know though. I'm just trying to think of like, I guess it also comes back to, you know, if you're coming into a hard day at work and you come into the office, what do you need? Like, I think a lot about this. Like, what do you need from your colleagues? Do you want, like, there's some colleagues that become your friends, or some, I think you're very good, like as you've just said, you're good at like saying, this is the boundary, this is the work capsule of like entering here, and the other things don't exist. I don't think other people are as good at that. I'm definitely not. And so but also at the same time, like, well, what do I, like, I have friends that can fill those buckets. And how much do you, there's this kind of Esther Perel discussion of like, you used to have a whole village and now you expect it just from your one partner. Or especially like in the US, your job is tied to your insurance, your health insurance, which
Mhm.
growing up, I thought nothing of it. Then you come to a country that has health insurance outside of your work expectation. You're like, whoa, that's crazy. And you're like, no, it's crazy that you need your work to be like, and here's your gym membership, and here's your, you know, sports team stipend, and all these other aspects of your life. What is it, like that book, The Circle? Did you ever read it?
I can't remember if I've read that.
I made a movie of it too, where it's essentially like, it's a
Was
very
that about
typical,
social? Was it about a social media platform?
I think so, but essentially like when you came in, like the being within the company became your whole life, and you're like, oh,
Yes. I think
you
I
didn't
saw
come
the
here.
movie.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
that kind of, especially again working in tech, that really, it gives that all of those opportunities to like have your work replace a lot of external community and connection. And I just think that's such an interesting thing, because for a while, like, you know, benefits are fantastic. Like, it's great. Like, freelance is wonderful. But at the same time, you're just kind of like, what do you actually need from your work? And so sometimes, like, we as marketers, we're looking for, how do we deliver the authentic thought leadership, but in a scientific way, in a structured way, and vulnerable way. And at the same time, sometimes I'm like, do we really need that from that person anyway? Like, if somebody comes up and is like, I've spent 5 years learning about this model, here it is. Do I need anything more than that expertise?
Oh, good question.
Like, are we over egging? I mean, here's a 100 million question. In the
Okay.
end, you have like for likes
Mhm.
products, same information, same value to your company. In the end, is the buyer going to be like, well, their ads are a little more authentic? Are
Well,
you
I
going
mean,
to end up buying some big SaaS system? Like, what is going to be in your head
yeah,
to
that's
head?
interesting. That's interesting. But also in that context, you'd be expecting a person to know why they're buying. And I think a lot of times people don't know necessarily what biases or exposures or thoughts or feelings might come into the buying decision. And sometimes that's also manipulated by the marketer. They try and get a certain level of mindset and get the potential buyer bought into something before they go and ask for the sale and get the CTAs going. I don't think a lot of people know why they do a lot of different things, and whether or not we're talking on a personal level or on a commercial level, I think that marketers try and leverage that where they can. If they can create an emotional appeal, if they can create a psychological appeal. There's also a lot of psyops kind of things that go into marketing these days, and manipulative things. And a lot of times I think the buyer doesn't even know it's happening.